Let me tell you something I learned early in life. The marketplace doesn't care how many hours you put in. It doesn't care if you showed up at sunrise and left after midnight. It measures one thing and one thing only: value. If money simply rewarded time, then the hardest working people would also be the wealthiest. But you and I both know that isn't true. I've seen people work 12-hour days for years, sweating, laboring, sacrificing, and yet never breaking free from paycheck to paycheck. And I've also seen others who don't appear nearly as busy, but who earn fortunes. Why? Because the difference isn't in the clock. The difference is in the value created. When I was younger, I made the mistake of thinking that if I just worked harder, the rewards would follow. But then I noticed people around me who seemed to have unlocked a different code. They weren't running faster on the treadmill. They had simply stepped onto a different track altogether. They were focused on increasing the value of what they brought to the table. Instead of asking, how many hours can I work? They asked, how valuable can I become? And that question changes everything. Think about it. If someone is paid $10 an hour, that's not because their time is worth $10. It's because the marketplace has judged the value they provide in that hour at $10. Now imagine sharpening your skills, expanding your knowledge, and developing abilities that few possess but many need. Suddenly, you can go from $10 an hour to $100 an hour, or even $1,000 an hour. The hours don't change, but the value packed into those hours transforms everything. Here's a truth that took me years to fully appreciate. Skills multiply your time. A person who has mastered communication, leadership, sales, or problem solving can achieve in 1 hour what might take someone else a full day. That's why wealthy people often appear to work less. They're not less engaged, they've just condensed more value into less time. It's leverage not of machines, but of mind and mastery. And here's the good news: value isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. I wasn't born with any special advantage. I started in obscurity, struggling to figure out how to get ahead. But the moment I committed to learning, reading the books, listening to mentors, practicing skills daily, my trajectory changed. Every skill I sharpened became like a key, opening doors that were previously closed. Every ounce of value I added to myself made the marketplace open its arms a little wider. So if you're looking for where to start, it's simple. Choose one skill that the world rewards highly and dedicate just 20 minutes a day to it. Not an hour, not a marathon, just 20 focused minutes. Do that daily and watch what happens. In a year, you'll be noticeably better. In 3 years, you'll be unrecognizable. In 5 years, people will pay handsomely just to have access to what you can do. The truth is, money doesn't chase effort, it chases value. And the fastest way to change your financial future is to stop stretching your schedule and start stretching your skills. One of the most powerful lessons I ever learned is that the words we speak are seeds we plant into our own future. Every phrase, every casual remark, every repeated thought carries with it a weight that either builds us up or quietly tears us down. Most people don't even realize it, but they are constantly programming themselves into poverty with the way they talk. Words like, I can't afford it, that's impossible, or I'll never make that kind of money, are not just statements of fact, they are declarations to your mind. And here's the thing, the mind listens. The subconscious doesn't argue, it obeys. Say something long enough, and it will build a belief. And beliefs, sooner or later, create results. I've seen people with incredible potential sabotage themselves because of the language they chose. I once knew a man who would constantly say, I'm just not good with money. And sure enough, no matter how much he earned, money seemed to slip right through his fingers. But I've also known people who, even when broke, would say things like, "I'm learning to handle money better every day," or "I'm figuring out how to make this work." And little by little, their lives began to align with those declarations. The difference wasn't just in their income, it was in their outlook. I remember when I was struggling financially, living in a tiny apartment and trying to make sense of why nothing seemed to change. My vocabulary was filled with phrases like, "I can't afford that," or "I'll never get ahead." Then I heard someone challenge me to change just one phrase. Instead of saying, "I can't afford it," say, "How can I afford it?" At first it felt silly, but I tried it. And you know what happened? That little shift unlocked creativity. Instead of shutting down my mind with a statement, I opened it up with a question. And when you ask a question, the brain starts searching for answers. Suddenly I was seeing opportunities I had ignored before simply because my words had blinded me. You see, the words you use every day are either doors or walls. Negative words shut you in, positive words open possibilities. When you say, "I can't," your mind shuts off. When you ask, "How can I?" your mind turns on. That's the language of prosperity. Prosperity doesn't start with a big bank account. It starts with a way of speaking that makes growth possible. And it's not just about money. Think about relationships, health, business. When you say, "This always happens to me," you've closed the case. When you say, "What can I learn from this?" you've opened a path. The difference is night and day. That's why I tell people to keep a journal of their words. Write down the phrases you catch yourself saying about money, work, or life. Then, right beside them, rewrite those phrases in a way that empowers instead of defeats you. Over time, you'll notice that your language changes. And when your language changes, your belief system shifts. And once belief shifts, results are inevitable. I promise you this, if you discipline yourself to speak the language of prosperity, the world will begin to respond in kind. Because words shape belief, and belief shapes results. Let me share something most people never understand about money. Saving alone will never make you wealthy. Saving is necessary, yes, but if that's all you do, you're preparing for security, not freedom. The poor save to avoid disaster, to have a cushion. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the wealthy save to invest, to create more money, to build a system where money works for them, not the other way around. True financial freedom comes from learning to make your money produce more money, and that requires a mindset shift from safety to opportunity. I remember when I was first starting out, I had a small paycheck, barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and a few bills. Naturally, I thought saving was impossible. But I realized that even with little money, I could start small, just 10% here, 10% there, and build a habit. It wasn't about the amount at first. It was about consistency and direction. I opened 2 separate accounts, one for savings to protect against emergencies, and one for investing to grow wealth. Over time, those small, disciplined steps multiplied far beyond what I imagined. Think about it this way. Savings alone is a safety net. It prevents you from falling. But investments? Investments are the ladder that lifts you higher. I've met people who saved faithfully their entire lives, yet never achieved financial independence because all their money sat in checking accounts, untouched by compounding growth. I've also seen those who started small with investments, stocks, real estate, even small business ventures, and watched their financial freedom expand, not through luck, but through strategy and discipline. The key is automation. Don't rely on willpower alone, because temptation is always there. Decide in advance, 10% into savings, 10% into investments, every single month before you spend a penny elsewhere. Protect your safety, yes, but also plant seeds for growth. It doesn't matter if you start with a small amount. What matters is that you begin and that you do it consistently. The magic isn't in the dollars, it's in the discipline and the mindset. Remember, saving protects your life today, but investing creates your freedom tomorrow. And when you combine both, you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. You're building a foundation, a ladder, and a plan that leads to independence. Wealth is never accidental. It's deliberate. And deliberate wealth begins with a commitment to save smartly and invest wisely. Start today, even if it's small. Automate 10% into savings, 10% into investments. Guard your present, grow your future, and watch how consistency compounds into freedom. Let's take a moment to consider a truth many overlook. Wealth is not only created, it must be protected. You can earn a fortune, build a thriving business, or invest wisely. But if you fail to safeguard it, all that effort can vanish like smoke in the wind. Most fortunes are not lost because of low income or bad luck. They are lost because people fail to manage what they already have. I've seen it over and over. Someone inherits a business, grows it for years, and then one mismanaged decision or a lack of protection erases decades of hard work. The lesson is clear. Earning money is just the first step. Preserving it is equally, if not more, important. When I began learning about wealth, I noticed a pattern among those who failed despite having great earning potential. They were careless, impulsive, or unaware of the risks they were taking. They ignored insurance, ignored diversification, ignored the principle that wealth is fragile if not properly cared for. I remember a colleague who had a thriving business and substantial investments, but he neglected to properly diversify his assets and relied too heavily on one stream of income. When the market shifted, he lost nearly half his wealth almost overnight. That moment taught me that protection is not pessimism, it's intelligent foresight. Protecting wealth means planning for uncertainties and reducing exposure to risks that can destroy your foundation. It means insurance policies for your health, property, and life. It means understanding how taxes, inflation, and legal structures impact your money. It means not putting all your eggs in one basket. For example, I've always diversified investments across income-producing assets, educational ventures, and strategic opportunities. I even maintain an emergency fund to absorb shocks. This approach allows me to sleep at night, knowing that even if one part of my financial plan fails, the rest continues to support my security. Practical discipline is just as vital as planning. Each month, I review my assets, liabilities, and strategies, asking, where is the unnecessary risk? Where can I tighten control? Which areas require more protection? This simple habit is like tending a garden. If you ignore weeds, they spread. If you nurture your plants, they flourish. Wealth grows when it's protected and managed, not when it's left to chance. So remember, building wealth is only half the battle. The other half is guarding it. Create systems that defend your resources, diversify intelligently, and review your portfolio regularly. Fortune favors those who combine opportunity with caution. Protect what you've built, and your wealth will endure through life's uncertainties. Time is the most precious currency you will ever hold, far more valuable than money, because money can be earned, lost, and regained. But time is irreplaceable. I've seen people work tirelessly, chasing every opportunity. Yet they fail to understand that their real advantage lies in how they manage the hours, not just the dollars. Wealth is not merely the accumulation of money, it is the intelligent use of time to create, learn, and grow. Every successful person I've known understands that compounding doesn't just apply to investments. It applies to effort, knowledge, relationships, and productivity when applied consistently over time. I remember early in my career, I was working long hours, thinking more time equaled more success. Yet, I wasn't multiplying my efforts, I was merely busy. The breakthrough came when I realized that my value could increase exponentially if I applied my best hours to high-leverage activities instead of routine tasks. Just as interest compounds in a bank account, your actions compound over time, but only if they are focused on creation, not consumption. Time spent wisely builds momentum, while time wasted is forever gone. To use time as a multiplier, you must first evaluate how your hours are being spent. Look at your daily tasks, meetings, and activities. Ask yourself, which of these truly add value, grow my wealth, or advance my skills? Which can be delegated, automated, or eliminated entirely? One small change in how you allocate your time can free hours each week, hours that can be invested in learning a high-value skill, starting a side business, or strategizing for long-term wealth. I've personally automated recurring administrative tasks, delegated responsibilities where others could handle them, and protected my focus for creation rather than distraction. The result has been more growth, more opportunity, and ultimately more wealth than I could have achieved by simply working longer hours. Remember, time magnifies whatever you invest in it. If you spend it on trivial matters, the results are minimal. But if you spend it on meaningful, productive, and wealth-building activities, the payoff grows exponentially. It's a simple choice, but it requires discipline and awareness. This week, identify one task you are doing that can be delegated, automated, or eliminated, and reclaim that time. Use it to create, learn, and multiply your wealth. Time is your greatest multiplier. Make it work for you. When it comes to building true wealth, the distinction between assets and liabilities is the line between freedom and struggle. I've seen it countless times. People earn well, spend freely, and wonder why they never get ahead. They buy cars, gadgets, or fancy lifestyles that drain their wallets, thinking ownership equals wealth. But wealth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by what works for you, by what puts money in your pocket rather than taking it out. Assets buy freedom. Liabilities steal it. This principle has been one of the most powerful truths I've applied in my own life. Early in my career, I earned a modest income, yet I watched some of my peers chase status symbols and fancy possessions. They lived paycheck to paycheck, even with six-figure salaries, while I focused on acquiring things that could generate income, books that increased my knowledge, equipment for side projects, and investments that yielded returns. I realized quickly that financial freedom comes not from earning more, but from owning assets that work for you. A rental property, a stock that pays dividends, or even a skill others are willing to pay for can be an asset. These things continually give, allowing you to leverage your time and energy, while liabilities simply consume what you already have. The strategy is simple but profound. Before any purchase, ask yourself, will this put money in my pocket or take it out? This question forces clarity. It stops impulsive decisions and refocuses your mind on creation, not consumption. For example, I used to want a new car simply for comfort, but instead, I invested in a small business course that taught me a skill I could monetize. That skill earned far more than any car ever would. Over time, those small choices compound. Buying a liability today might give temporary pleasure, but buying an asset builds freedom that lasts a lifetime. Another practical approach is to evaluate current possessions. Is that extra gadget, subscription, or luxury item serving you, or is it quietly taking? Awareness is the first step toward changing behavior. Start keeping a notebook of all major purchases, classifying them as assets or liabilities. Track the impact of each on your finances over the next 3 months. You'll start seeing patterns, seeing clearly which decisions multiply your wealth and which drain it. Wealth is the result of intentional choices, consistently applied over time, Each decision to acquire an asset is a brick in the foundation of freedom, while each liability is a weight slowing your progress. Think deeply before you spend, and let assets work tirelessly for you. This understanding changes everything, because when you own assets, money serves you, and freedom becomes inevitable. One of the biggest obstacles to building wealth isn't the economy, the market, or bad luck, it's fear. Fear paralyzes us, keeps us stagnant, and convinces us that security lies in doing nothing. I know this from my own early years when I watched opportunity pass me by because I was afraid to step out of my comfort zone. Risk is often painted as something to avoid, yet in reality, risk is the very currency of progress. If you want to move forward, you must learn to master risk, not fear it. Fear is the cost of staying broke. Risk is the ticket to financial freedom. I remember when I first considered investing in a small business. My instincts screamed danger. What if I lost everything? I could have avoided it entirely, stayed in my safe but modest job, and hoped for slow progress. Instead, I took time to evaluate the situation carefully. I listed the worst-case scenario. I could lose my initial investment but learn a critical business lesson. I considered the best-case scenario. The business could grow, produce passive income, and teach me skills that would multiply future opportunities. And then I assessed the most likely outcome: moderate profit, some learning, and a manageable risk. That simple exercise of writing outcomes down removed the emotional fog and gave me clarity. By approaching risk methodically rather than emotionally, I could act decisively. The principle extends far beyond investments. Every step in life involves some level of risk. Asking for a raise, starting a side project, moving to a new city, or acquiring a new skill. When you master risk, you stop being a victim of fear and become the architect of your own future. Calculated risk is always informed by knowledge. That's why preparation, learning, and analysis are non-negotiable. Fear thrives in ignorance. Risk is manageable with understanding. A practical daily habit is to analyze decisions this way. For each opportunity, list the worst case, best case, and most likely outcomes. Write them down. Seeing them on paper often shows you that the worst case isn't as catastrophic as your mind imagined, while the best case can be transformative. Over time, this habit sharpens judgment, strengthens confidence, and converts fear into a tool rather than a chain. Remember, comfort zones are the enemy of wealth, progress demands risk, and wealth rewards those brave enough to act with knowledge. Fear is inevitable, but letting fear dictate your decisions is optional. Learn to see risk clearly, act intentionally, and let calculated action propel you toward freedom.